An objectively weird Bible passage. This is an objectively weird Bible passage. Now, what happens here is there are some similar stories in other Gospels, and what we tend to do is go right over top of the weird ones and go to the ones that are a little bit more comfortable. There are more comfortable versions of this story in Matthew and Mark and John. In Matthew and Mark and John, this happens at the very last moments of Jesus' life. The woman comes and anoints Jesus' head, and we are told that this is Mary Magdalene. She comes and she anoints Jesus' head to prepare him for death. That is not what happens in this story. This is the beginning of Jesus' story. This is the beginning of his ministry, and he is dining in the home of a friend. They're just having supper. There's no expectations here. This is not some sort of performative act. This is not an opportunity for Jesus to give a sermon or to preach to people or to heal people. Jesus is just having dinner. Now, a couple things we should know. In the ancient Middle East, or not ancient, in the mid-modern Middle East of the time when Jesus lived, they didn't have tables. So they weren't sitting in dining chairs at a table. So we can, first of all, take the picture of her crawling underneath the table out of our heads. That is not what happened. They didn't have tables. What they had instead was pillows on the floor, and people would eat laying down, essentially, reclining on a pillow. So Jesus and his friends would have been on the floor, propped up in a reclining position, eating with their hands in a group. This makes us weirdly uncomfortable because I spend a lot of time yelling at my children to not eat laying down, right? Occasionally we let them eat on the couch while we watch TV as a sort of reward for the end of the week. By occasionally, I mean whenever I'm tired, right? We let them sit on the couch and eat TV, and instantly when they lay on the couch, they lay down, and I say, sit up, it's not good for your digestion to lay down, and you're gonna get food everywhere. But this is how they ate all the time. This was completely normal. Simon the Pharisee is not Simon Peter. It's just some guy named Simon, who happens to be a Pharisee, and who is also a friend of Jesus. Remember that Pharisees started out as friends to Jesus. They're just friends, and they're eating dinner together when this woman comes in to the house unexpectedly. Now, there is no expectation that Simon would have washed Jesus' feet. You didn't do that for friends. There was no expectation that Simon would have anointed Jesus' head when he came in. You didn't do that for friends. The only time that people washed one another's feet was when they wanted to give a sign of how devoted they were to this person. Foot washing was a sign of devotion and of acknowledging how amazing the person was in that room. Simon was not expected to do anything other than feed him. But this woman comes into the room and is so overcome. She'd just come, remember, with a perfumed jar. She's so overcome that she comes into the room and begins weeping. She begins weeping out of, I don't know, joy, maybe? Whatever it is, she is overcome in Jesus' presence and begins to weep. Now remember, she's standing up, so she's not lying down upon Jesus crying. She's standing up and her tears are falling onto his feet. She proceeds to anoint him as she promised that she would. And all Simon can think is, I wonder if Jesus knows who this person really is. He sets up a test, essentially. Well, if Jesus is who he really says he is, then he'll know that this is a woman he shouldn't be talking to. She shouldn't be here. She is, after all, a sinner. And we don't let sinners in this place. Simon immediately sets Jesus up for a test that Jesus will likely fail, unless, of course, Jesus is who he says he is. Sort of like those people who call up people who called up like this dial-in tarot card places. You remember? One of my friends in college, she was a theater major, so she worked for Madame Cleo. She was Madame Cleo. She was the other end of the line. So if you called, she did your tarot reading, right? She had little notes on every card, what it meant, because she was making it up the whole time, right? But people would call and like test her and be like, are you really true? And they would make up a story to see if she would catch it, right? This is essentially what Simon is doing here. He's setting Jesus up for a test to see if Jesus is going to fail. He's going to catch the trap that he's about to fall into. And this woman, who, like many women in the Bible, does not have a name, is just called a person from the city. And we know about those city folks, right? She's a person from the city who's a sinner. And for 2,000 years, everybody has assumed that means she was a prostitute, right? Because that's obviously the only sin women are capable of. Women never do anything else that's wrong. There's no indication of what her sin is, just that she is a sinner. She comes from a place of needing forgiveness and salvation. Jesus goes on to give to Simon a very strange parable. Two people owe a debt. One person owes $500, one person owes $5,000. The guy forgives both of them. Who will love the person who forgave them more? And Simon responds, well, the person who owed more money, which makes sense, except for I'm not entirely sure that that's true. I've owed people $500. I've owed people $50,000. I owe the student loan company quite a lot of money. And if they were to forgive it for me, I would love all of them equally, right? I'm not really sure the amount of our debt is equal to the amount that we love the people who forgive us. So I'm not sure that this parable is right, but it proves the point, which is forgiveness is an act of love and is not dependent upon how much you need that forgiveness. Whether you need the forgiveness a little bit or whether you need the forgiveness a lot, whoever forgives you, you will be grateful. Simon misses the point entirely. And the woman says thank you and leaves, and as far as we know, never sees Jesus again. Except for once again in Luke's gospel, it's the unexpected person who teaches the people who are supposed to know better. Luke's gospel over and over and over and over again, it's the people who don't know anything, who are not expected to do the right thing, who have no expectation of understanding what is supposed to happen when they see Jesus, who over and over again are the heroes of the story. Luke over and over and over again points at the Pharisees, who are the religious people, tells them that they should do better, should know better. To whom much is given, much is expected. Forgiveness is an act of love and does not depend upon whether the other person has earned it or not. Forgiveness is an act of love and does not depend on whether the other person has earned it or not. God doesn't forgive us conditionally. God doesn't forgive us and say, I'll forgive you on the condition that you go and live a sin-free life from now on. God does not forgive us and say, I love you more because you sinned more, and I love you a little bit less because you sinned not quite so much. This forgiveness is worth more than this forgiveness. God forgives, period. Jesus doesn't give her a quiz. He doesn't ask her how she's going to live her life from now on. He's not going to ask her any questions about how much she deserves this act of forgiveness. All he says is that she recognized that she was in need of forgiveness. She came and asked for it. And Jesus says, go, your faith has healed you. That's it. And yet we put all these conditions on whether we're going to help somebody else or not. We put all these conditions on whether we're going to love somebody else or not. We put all these conditions on whether someone is worthy of forgiveness or not. And they will never live up to whatever condition that you put on them because they're people. They're people, and they're going to mess up, and you're going to mess up, and all of us need forgiveness. And if we start holding back on our forgiveness until the other person forgives, then all of us are going to be in really, really deep trouble. Whether or not I love you does not depend on whether you love me or not. Whether or not I'm kind to you does not depend on whether you're kind to me. Our actions only depend upon our ability to live into the forgiveness that God has offered to us. And other people may never live up to the forgiveness that you've offered to them, but that's not their responsibility. We can hope for it. We can wish that for them. We can pray for that for them. But all we can do is control whether we offer that forgiveness or not. Now, I want to say something. Forgiveness does not mean continuing to stay in a situation that is hurtful or toxic. Forgiveness does not mean saying it's okay. What you did is okay. Forgiveness does not give permission to that person to continue to harm you or to continue to put you in a place that is dangerous to your soul. Forgiveness is not about them. Forgiveness is about you and your heart, forgiving yourself enough, forgiving them enough to let their control over your life go. You no longer have control over my response to you. Did this woman deserve Jesus' forgiveness? I don't know. But I know when Jesus died, the last thing he said was, "My Father, forgive them. They do not know any better." And if Jesus can do that, then surely we can open up our hearts just a little bit and let go of the anger and the hurt and the resentment that has control over our hearts. Maybe we can choose to love and to forgive whether or not other people have earned it. And that is the power of a God who loves us no matter what. Amen.